Hi, I'm Nick Malowick, and welcome to An Evil Mind, a video crime fiction blog from Xenobooks. This week, Rex Miller. Miller is something of an enigmatic figure in horror and crime literature. In the Joe Lansdale episode, I mentioned what they called the splatterpunk movement in horror fiction in the late 80s, early 90s. And Miller kind of got lumped in with that, although he was first and foremost a crime slash suspense slash thriller writer. His work tended to have a gore level that kind of pushed him into the realm of splatterpunk. It said Miller chose three professions where people didn't see his face. First and foremost, he was a radio disc jockey, worked all over the Midwest for many, many years. Very popular and well paid in his day. He also, however, becomes a novelist in 1987 with the publication of his first book, Slob. Blurbs from both Stephen King and Harlan Ellison, incidentally. Wins the Bram Stoker Award for Best First Novel in that year, and precedes Silence of the Lambs by 1 year, which I'll circle back to in a second. And the third profession that Miller chose was as a mail-order dealer of collectibles, specifically things having to do with science fiction, genre fiction, radio shows. If you wanted an original shadow decoder ring from the 1930s, Rex Miller is the guy who can get that for you, at least in his time. Born, raised, and ultimately dying in the same rough section of southeastern Missouri, and spending a lot of time professionally in St. Louis. Miller lives between 1939 and I blanked on it, 2004. The last several years of his life spent dealing with complications from a stroke. His last novel is Butcher in 1994. But his short fiction continues to be anthologized until, I believe, 1998, at least, again, per Wikipedia. And speaking of Wikipedia, it's kind of bare bones, but that fits. There's not a lot of information extant out there about Miller. There are some reminiscences from people he worked with in the radio business. There are some people that knew him as a collector and dealer of collectibles. There's even an article out there that he wrote for a collector's trade magazine. Why I bring up Silence of the Lambs a minute ago is that both Thomas Harris, who will have his own episode of this at some point in the future, and Miller fell into the same trap. They both created essentially superhuman serial killer characters that they found too, for whatever reason, endearing to the public and too lucrative to let go of, and whose edges they both eventually softened. So it's Chain Gang with Miller, and later on, of course, Hannibal Lecter with Harris. So this character, Chain Gang, he is an abused child, which leads to him ultimately becoming a serial killer. Not that is a predetermined path, but he becomes, he is in the universe of these novels the most prolific serial killer in America. Eventually, he is captured by the United States government and imprisoned in the Marion Supermax Penitentiary in Illinois. The government frees Chain Gang, in a manner of speaking, in 1965 to send him, along with certain other similar subjects, to Vietnam as a means of both studying both serial killers and finding a way to weaponize certain humans against the North Vietnamese. Short version, they attach Chain Gang to Special Operations Forces and allow him to roam in the wilds of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, more or less killing at will and being allowed a long leash, as it were, so long as he only attacks the enemy. The problem is Chain Gang eventually slips their custody, finds his way back to the United States, and continues, a nearly uninterrupted killing spree for most of the 1970s and 1980s, until he finally comes to the attention of a cop named Jack Eichord, I believe twice divorced alcoholic, who happens to have one true ability in life, and that's as a homicide investigator, specifically as an investigator of serial homicides. Despite all of his other professional failings, Eichord has become something of an expert in serial killers within the universe of the books, and becomes attached to what they call the Federal Major Crimes Task Force, or McTuff, so which he is occasionally drawn from his day-to-day homicide detective duties in a Chicago stand-in city in the books, to be sent out chasing people like Chaingang. So these are, Eichord's meant to be a recurring character. Chaingang was not. However, becomes, and spoiler alert, for whatever this is worth, supposedly Chaingang dies at the end of Slob. He is too popular a character to be kept down. He is resurrected and sent out into other books. And like Dr. Lecter, stops being as fearsome a character as he originally was, because like Dr. Lecter, he starts killing not simply random victims with whom we might sympathize, but he starts killing people who deserve it. Chaingang increasingly is sent against people who abuse children. He's about people who abuse animals, culminating in the novel Butcher, where he is sent against a former Nazi doctor, a Joseph Mengele stand-in who has escaped to the United States, under tentative direction by the government. It turns out the government's got a tracker in Chaingang's head, and they can use this to manipulate him in subtle ways. And there's also a psychiatrist who works for the government who knows Chaingang well enough to influence his behavior in various ways. Another novel that I would highly recommend to people of Miller's, and this came out from a different publisher. All of the Chaingang and Eichord books came out through Signet as paperback originals, which is fitting because they are pure pulp. But then this novel, set in Vietnam, concerning a special operations force sent to destroy a North Vietnamese radio transmitter, Profane Men, is out through a company called Onyx, which leads to some peculiar complications. This book and the Chaingang novel Savant have one character in common, a sniper named Shooter Price, who was eventually sent by the government in the book Savant to kill Chaingang. However, Chaingang does not appear in Profane Men, but there is a Chaingang stand-in character. I'm sure in the original manuscript it probably was Chaingang because of the difference in publishers. I'm presuming that creates a legal problem. These books were very popular genre items in their day. And Miller, a popular artist, like I said, there's a limited number of novels, but he had short fiction anthologized in well over 20 other books and magazines in a fairly short span of time. So he burns bright, he doesn't burn for very long. Most of the novels are available. Kindles, last I looked, they were about $4 a piece. They're probably, I own a few of them. There's a lot of typos, so they're probably scanned and translated using character recognition. There's some oddities. Not formatted all that great, but the price is right, and I would urge you to get these. On the other hand, if you look in used bookstores, they publish these things by the pallet load, so you won't have a heck of a lot of trouble. You can find at least Slob for nothing out there. I mean, I haven't looked on Amazon, I haven't looked on eBay, but even if you just go out to half-price books, they've probably got some of these. The non-Chaingang Eichord novels are worth getting. The later Chaingang novels are worth getting. Profane Man, like I said, recommend without reservation. There has, however, been some, if you look at people's blogs and look back at older crime and horror fiction, there has been some revisionist thinking. Some of the things that made these appealing in their time, the level of violence, the sheer headlong, frenetic pace of the writing, have come to be seen in later years by detriments. I still like these. I don't like them without reservation, but I still like them. I still recommend them. A lot of other people not so crazy about it, and that may speak to some changing standards in genre fiction. These are pulp books. They happen to come out from a major paperback publisher, but they're pulpy and they are purple. And they were stylistically of their time. You saw, I don't know, and I haven't read that much recent horror fiction, so I don't know, but for example, you get a lot of backstory on the victims. The chapter will open with so-and-so going through their daily life, and here's their backstory, and here's what they're like, and what they're interested in, and then whammo, Chaingang comes out of nowhere and kills them. You would see, Stephen King did stuff like that. Clive Barker would do setups like that. It adds to the, it makes it more poignant, when victim X dies, if we've come to know them a little bit as a person. But one thing about these books, a lot of Chaingang's victims are intentionally just sort of a faceless rabble to be mowed down by him. Even the ones who are sympathetic characters, and like I said, increasingly Chaingang's victims become unsympathetic as the books go forward. But I remember a lot of people writing like that in that era, 25, 30 years ago, and I don't know if that's still the case in horror fiction. That's something of a deficiency in my current reading. So, like I said, at some point we'll talk about Thomas Harris. It occurs to me we haven't even talked about Elmore Leonard yet. I might do him next week. I still want to do roundups of things African-American crime characters not written by African-American authors, as well as those written by African-American authors. I want to do a roundup of early 20th century Asian detectives, Charlie Chan, for example. I've been reading those recently. I've been reading some of the Joe Garb stories by Roe Whitfield, and I need to read Mr. Moto. So that's coming at some point in the future. As always, thank you very much for watching this. Hope you liked it. Hope you found something informative. Hope I told you about something you didn't know. That's kind of the point of all this, is bringing some of these things back and trying to expose them to people. Like the channel, sign up for notifications. I will put links to the Kindle books, Kindle versions of Miller's novels, certainly down in the description. So you will find those. You'll find my books there. And hope you can buy some of those, support the vlog here. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see you next week. Alrighty, bye.